Will Hunting is only 20 years old, and on the surface, his life looks unremarkable. He lives in a rough, working-class neighborhood in South Boston, spending his nights drinking with childhood friends and his days laboring as a janitor at one of the most prestigious schools in the country, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Though he mops the marble floors and scrubs chalk dust from blackboards, he carries inside him a gift no one suspects. One afternoon, while pushing his mop down the quiet corridor of the mathematics department, Will pauses before a chalkboard. Covering it is a sprawling equation, complex and intimidating, left behind by Professor Gerald Lambeau. Lambeau, a celebrated mathematician, had challenged his students to solve it by the end of the semester, promising recognition in the MIT Journal and his personal endorsement to whoever could manage it. For the professor, it was both a lesson and a test of brilliance. For Will, it is like a secret dare. Most students glance at the problem and walk away defeated, but Will's eyes fix on the symbols. The puzzle digs into his mind and refuses to let go. All day, it turns over in his head, demanding an answer. That night, sitting with his friends at a bar, Will zones out, lost in thought. He soon excuses himself, slipping back to his modest apartment where the bathroom mirror becomes his canvas. With soap and steam, he scribbles equations, erasing and rewriting until the logic finally falls into place. By dawn, he has cracked it. The next weekend, Will returns to his janitor job. Between sweeping and emptying trash cans, he casually writes the solution on the chalkboard. Days later, Professor Lambeau returns and discovers the anonymous work. He is stunned. This was no minor puzzle. This was a theorem so difficult he expected it to take months, perhaps years, for even his best students to solve. Yet, here it was, elegantly completed. He wonders which brilliant mind in his class could have pulled this off. While the professor obsesses, Will slips back into his ordinary life. That night, he rides around with his friends Chucky, Morgan, and Billy. Passing through the neighborhood, they encounter a group of locals. Among them is a face Will knows all too well, the boy who used to bully him in childhood. Without hesitation, Will demands the car stop. Fueled by years of pent-up rage, he lunges and strikes, fists flying. The fight spirals into chaos until the wail of sirens cuts through the night. Police swarm in, dragging Will away in handcuffs, while his friends shout in protest. The following morning, Professor Lambeau addresses his class. His students buzz with curiosity about the mysterious genius who solved the problem. Lambeau, though eager to identify the mind behind it, only grows more determined to push them further. He scrawls a new challenge on the board, one he and his colleagues wrestled with for 2 years. He promises that solving it will bring even greater glory. But Will isn't in that classroom. He's facing a judge. In court, Will chooses to defend himself. Armed with an uncanny memory and a sharp tongue, he recites constitutional rights and legal precedents with confidence far beyond his education. For a moment, it seems he might outwit the system. But his long record of assaults and altercations weighs heavily, and the judge is unmoved. Will is sentenced to jail unless bail can be arranged. That's when Professor Lambeau steps in. Struck by Will's brilliance, he visits the courtroom, convincing the judge to release Will under strict conditions. Will must study mathematics with him every week, and also undergo therapy to confront his anger and criminal impulses. With little choice, Will agrees. Once free, Will quickly proves his genius in Lambeau's office. Equations that stump graduate students fall easily beneath his chalk. Lambeau beams with excitement, certain he's discovered a once-in-a-generation mind. But therapy is another matter entirely. The first psychologist storms out when Will mocks his book, having read it cover to cover in a single night. The second attempts hypnosis, but Will turns the session into a crude comedy routine, leaving the man red-faced and humiliated. One by one, the experts quit, declaring him impossible. Lambeau grows desperate, until he thinks of an old friend. Sean McGuire is not famous, not decorated like Lambeau, but he is steady, grounded, and scarred by his own battles. Teaching psychology at a small community college, Sean lives a quiet life haunted by the death of his wife. When Lambo approaches him with Will's case, Sean resists. His schedule is full, his grief still heavy. But Lambo presses, insisting Will is extraordinary, likening him to great prodigies who rose from obscurity to change the world. Sean finally agrees to meet the boy. The first session is a collision of wills. Will slouches in his chair, smirking, hurling sarcastic comments. He even mocks a painting on Sean's wall, dismissing it as meaningless. Sean endures calmly until Will makes the mistake of speaking about his late wife. The therapist snaps, gripping Will by the throat and warning him never to cross that line again. The session ends abruptly. Afterward, Lambo assumes Sean will quit like the others, but Sean surprises him. "I'll see him next week," he says firmly. And so begins a battle of patience between a wounded therapist and a boy who hides his genius behind arrogance and fear. The following week, Sean changes the setting. Instead of his office, he brings Will to a park bench. As ducks drift across the water, Sean finally speaks, cutting through Will's smug deflections. He tells the boy that intelligence alone means nothing. Will may know art history, but he has never stood in the Sistine Chapel. He may quote books on war, but he has never felt a friend's blood on his hands in battle. He may recite sonnets about love, but he has never lain awake beside a woman he fears losing. "You're just a kid," Sean says quietly, "and you don't know a damn thing about real life." For the first time, Will listens without retort. In their next meeting, Will remains silent the entire hour, trying to test Sean's patience. But Sean doesn't flinch. The silence itself becomes a kind of dialogue, a war of endurance. At the following session, Will breaks the tension with a dirty joke, and Sean chuckles. The ice begins to crack. Soon they talk about girls. And Will admits he recently went on a date with Skylar, a wealthy medical student he met at a bar. He confesses he doesn't want to see her again because he's afraid of spoiling the perfect image of her he carries in his head. Sean challenges him. Relationships aren't about perfection, they're about vulnerability. To prove it, he shares stories of his late wife, the little quirks and imperfections he loved most. It's those details, Sean explains, that make intimacy real. Encouraged, Will visits Skylar again. She's surprised he called, but agrees to meet. They spend the day laughing at the dog track, where Will spins lies about having 12 older brothers. She doesn't believe him, but plays along, charmed by his reckless humor. Later, she presses him to introduce her to his family, not realizing there is none. Instead, Will takes her to meet his friends. To his relief, Skylar fits right in, drinking beer and joking with Chucky and the others. But afterward, Chucky warns him not to waste her time. Deep down, Will's fear of rejection is obvious to everyone. Meanwhile, Professor Lambo grows impatient. He sees Will's future mapped out, research, academia, fame, and wants him to seize it now. But Sean disagrees. He argues that Will must find his own path, not one imposed on him. Their debates grow heated, each man claiming to know what's best for the boy. The tension between them reflects old wounds from their college days, rivalries never forgotten. Skylar, meanwhile, grows closer to Will, until one night she invites him to join her in California, where she plans to study at Stanford. Panic seizes him. He refuses, claiming he belongs in Boston, lashing out with cruel words. She presses him for honesty, but he can't bear to reveal his past. That he's an orphan, abused in foster homes, carrying scars no one wants to see. In anger and fear, he shouts that he doesn't love her. Heartbroken, Skylar leaves in tears. Shaken, Will turns his frustration on Lambo. During a session, he ridicules the professor's intellect, pointing out that he sees solutions faster than Lambo can even frame the problems. Lambo, humiliated, demands gratitude for all he's done. Will storms out, resentful of being treated like a project. Soon after, Will is invited to interview with the National Security Agency. They offer him wealth, prestige, and a future of influence. But Will rejects them, unleashing a monologue about how his calculations could be twisted into military strategies. leading to bombs dropped on innocent people halfway around the world. To him, that future is poison. Back in Sean's office, the tension between therapist and patient explodes. Sean asks Will what he really wants, and Will responds with evasions. Laying bricks, tending sheep, anything to avoid the question. Sean sees through it. He throws Will out, furious at the boy's refusal to be honest. But the dismissal stings. For the first time, Will realizes he cares about Sean's opinion. At the construction site, Chucky confronts him. He tells Will that if he's still living in the same neighborhood in 20 years, drinking the same beer on the same corner, it will be a tragedy. "You've got something none of us have," Chucky says, "and every day I hope I show up at your door and you're gone, because that's what's supposed to happen." The words land like a hammer. For the first time, Will sees that his friends believe he's capable of more, even if he doesn't. Weeks pass. Skylar leaves for California after Will fails to call her back. Alone, he sinks deeper into routine, working construction with Chucky, ignoring Lambo's calls, and skipping therapy sessions. Lambo warns Sean that if Will doesn't cooperate, the court will revoke the deal and send him back to prison. Sean refuses to pressure him, insisting that the boy has to face his own fears. Their old rivalry resurfaces. Lambo accuses Sean of jealousy. Sean accuses Lambo of vanity. Both men claim to want what's best, but their visions couldn't be more different. One afternoon, Will returns to Sean's office. The therapist looks at him quietly, then begins to share his own story. He reveals that his father was an alcoholic who beat him, that his childhood was filled with fear and shame. Then, he looks Will in the eye and tells him the words he's never heard before. "It's not your fault." Will nods, but Sean repeats it again and again until the defenses crumble. Will breaks down, sobbing in Sean's arms, releasing years of anger and self-loathing. For the first time, he lets someone see his pain. The breakthrough changes everything. At their final session, Will admits he's considering one of the jobs Lambo arranged, though he still doesn't know what future he wants. Sean encourages him not to be afraid of love, reminding him that real choices are made with the heart, not the intellect. He tells Will he's planning to take some time off himself, maybe travel, maybe finally live for something beyond work. He gives Will his number, telling him to call if he needs him. On his birthday, Will's friends surprise him with a beat-up car they've rebuilt from spare parts. They laugh, drink, and celebrate, but inside, Will knows a decision is looming. That night, Lambo visits Sean. The two old colleagues finally reconcile, acknowledging their mistakes and sharing a drink like the friends they once were. The next morning, Chucky pulls up to Will's house as always, ready for work. But this time, his friend is gone. The car sits empty. The house silent. Chucky stares at the empty doorway and smiles, realizing his dream has finally come true. Meanwhile, Sean finds a note in his mailbox. It's from Will. In it, the boy explains that he's leaving Boston, turning down the job offers, and heading west to see about a girl. The phrase is a nod to Sean's own story of skipping a baseball game to meet his wife. Reading it, Sean laughs softly, his eyes shining with pride. The final image is of Will driving down the highway, California bound, leaving behind the only world he's ever known, and finally stepping into the unknown future on his own terms.